Hey there, this is Jen T. Grace, founder of Publish Your Purpose, and I'm sitting here today with Dominic Longo talking about your book, Queer Flourishing. How are you doing, first and foremost?
I am doing very well, Jen. Thanks a lot. A lot of new year energy for me personally.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of new energy, kind of broadly speaking, good
Hmm.
energy, bad energy, and different energy. All the energies are kind of coalescing together. And
Yep.
before we kind of hit live for this, I was just basically saying to you that I think that it's wonderful that your book is actually coming out now, because I think a lot of people are going to be seeking a community where they can feel like they're flourishing. So before we dive into what that actually means and what that looks like, I'd love if you can kind of just share a little bit of who you are, how you show up in the world, and then a little bit about your book.
Sure. So I'm Dominic Longo. I live in Lower Manhattan in the East Village, which was once the home of punk, like where it got discussed. I'm not a punk, as you can see from my like flowery shirt. Which, by the way, speaking of New Year's energy, this is like the new Flourishing Gaze shirt for the year, because like I needed like a little bit of a new shirt, and it has flowers because flowers are one of my symbols for flourishing. Which also it being the week of Lunar New Year, I was at a Chinese restaurant for lunch on Wednesday, and there were these little kids, so cute, and their little cute new outfits that they were like running around and like Happy New Year stuff. So there truly is still reason to be joyful, and still a chance to renew ourselves.
Yeah.
You asked me to say something also about the book. Did I say enough about myself, just my name and where I am?
And like how do you show up in the world? Like, what is it that you do in the world?
Okay. Well, I do leadership development. I help people grow through really looking into themselves, noticing their own patterns, noticing what's working and what's not, having some deeper conversations with me and with others in their lives, or sometimes in a group that comes together in a developmental community that I convene. One-on-one coaching is a big part of that. And sometimes I help organizations as a consultant in sort of a more problem-solving mode to say, okay, how do we design a set of interventions that help you get the culture that you want and the sort of outcomes that you're looking for. I used to be a consultant full-time earlier in my career, and occasionally now I still will find a reason for that to be a good fit with a client, but primarily leadership development and coaching is what I do these days.
I love it. Okay, that's perfect. It's a nice little tee up here. So your book is called Queer Flourishing, A Guide to Personal Growth and Greater Aliveness for LGBTQ Adults. So I want to first kind of share kind of the big mission behind this book, and then maybe we can kind of go a little bit deeper in terms of like the relevancy that's happening today, and then a whole other kind of path that we can proceed down.
Okay. So the first thing you want me to talk about is what
what
the book. Well, it's a handbook. It's a guide. It's in a way quite practical. Literally with those prescriptive things like, please get yourself a journal and write. Please pause and like actually think about this question. Don't just read on. At one point, I describe it as a self-guided retreat. A time to step back, a place to get a wider perspective on oneself and one's life, and an opportunity to be asked questions by the text that normally you don't ask yourself, and maybe no one's ever asked, so that when you read this book, you create some new possibilities in conversation with the book for becoming yourself more fully. That's one of my kind of shorthand terms for what flourishing is, being on the path to becoming yourself more fully. The content of the book is a mix. Some of it's my own story, which I tell with a lot of honesty and forthcomingness to sort of try to model the looking that I'm trying to prompt the reader to do into their own life. And then besides the autobiographical narrative, there's sort of a theoretical treatment of some of the patterns that show up in especially queer lives. And that is drawing partly on this realm of adult development theory and research, which I'm not a scholar of, but I have learned so much for to make sense of myself and my clients. Of course, my own engagement with queer culture and queer community, and even some literature and films and plays that I have found generative to think about queer life. So it's kind of a unusual mix of material that some of my friends in the publishing industry, I note that I didn't hear this from you. They're like, oh, you should really not have all this stuff in it, like just, be super prescriptive, give the 10 things that, any gay person needs and tell them what they should do. And like, you're done. And I was like, no, that's not the book I want to write. And I know this is unconventional, but this mix, I find a more effective one to really get my reader to the deep places I'm trying to lead them.
And that is one of the benefits of working with a publisher that has a collaborative approach, instead of being turned down at other paths to have to create something that just doesn't align with what your intentions are. So I really do appreciate that you really stuck to what you were trying to create, because I feel like at the end of the day, your book, I think, is gorgeous. I think it looks
Thank you so
gorgeous.
much.
And I really feel like it will accomplish the goals that you kind of set out for it to accomplish. And so I have a couple of questions that I want to ask you, because I want to kind of go down a little bit deeper in what this looks like in practicality. But I feel like we would be remiss to not kind of talk about its relevancy today in regards to queer identities politically. So can we just kind of talk about that a little bit before we go a little bit deeper?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in the US American context, LGBTQ folks are generally not pleased with the election of Donald Trump and with the Republican Party's overall victory in this latest wave of elections. Some of the numbers I've seen is, 85% of LGBTQ voters voted for Kamala Harris. So we certainly see in our community, I certainly see among, other LGBTQ friends, colleagues, clients, upset, sometimes despair, sometimes pulling their hair out, people losing their jobs. Literally, one of my friends posted today about his, it's not because he's gay, but, works in a federal government capacity that is like, doing good out in the world. Well, a lot of those programs are being canceled. And he lost his job, or he's on indefinite furlough. So there is a alert, let's say, there is a feeling of threat. Gay people who are married are like, are they going to find a way to dissolve my marriage? So there is very real concern and legitimate concern about our rights as LGBTQ citizens of the United States, as well as our concern just about the living under a government where the rule of law is actually primary and not the will of the ruler, which is a concern that not just LGBTQ folks have. So you're asking about the relevance of my book in this particular moment. Flourishing, I mean, it seems so wonderful. Like, okay, flowers, like, oh, is this all, what do they say, rainbows and unicorns? And it's like, okay, no, yet flourishing, I believe, is what we're all made for, and what life is about. In fact, to be more fully alive is to be in that realm of flourishing. That's another one of my shorthands for what is flourishing: to becoming more fully alive, to becoming more fully myself. That's flourishing. It's a process. It's not a place. It's not a steady state thing, but we actually have to be moving for flourishing to be happening. So, okay, well, if we have a neo-fascist regime, if we have, racism and patriarchy once again moving through the U.S. government onto this society as it has in our history, if we're imposing a kind of definition of gender that somehow denies the very real lived experience of this beautiful but of course different minority called trans people, and say, no, you don't know who you are. We know because this is our policy or something. Like, well, WTF? Like, I mean, wow, this is a difficult time, and can we flourish in the midst of that? This has not been an easy question for me either, even as I worked on this book for 5 years, and then suddenly we have a felon in the White House, and it's like, can we still talk about flourishing? And I literally wrote a missive called "Flourishing and Felonocracy." Like, is that a thing?
Yeah.
As I reflected, and I have studied history, it turns out, really, I mean, if you think about it, the norm is that there be a felon in the throne. The norm is that thugs rule over the land. The norm is injustice, where the poor are thrown out, where the widows are exploited, where the disabled folks are sometimes murdered because they're useless in a certain. This is the norm in human history. I'm not talking about just in any one place. This is what human history has looked like. And when we do have something just arise, and yes, and actually in the US, we have had a lot of strides towards justice. We do have a kind of workings of a just regime, and it's always been imperfect, and it certainly is today. But for all of human history, flourishing has always been available and what we are here to pursue, I believe. So yes, now as much as ever, we must flourish.
I love that you're saying this, because that's kind of where my mind was going to, because I feel like there are going to be times where people are feeling uncertainty. And what I love about your book is that it really does force you to do the hard work and that self-exploration and that excavation to then make way to flourish. And so if you're coming into it with uncertainty, it's stuff that can be worked through while going through the pages of the book, which then kind of leads to the fact that you do have a leadership development program that you have created based on the curriculum, or based on the content of the book, that has now become the curriculum, which is your Queer Superpowers for Leaders. So to me, it's like an obvious progression. So is it I want you to talk about that program a little bit, because obviously in talking about that, you'll also be referencing, a lot of the material in the book. But is it fair that if someone, even if they may not be in a leadership specific role, but maybe they want to lead, maybe not in a traditional sense of how we're defining leadership, but maybe there's something in them that wants something more, would a program like this be also applicable to them?
Yeah, well, first, I'm not ready to take the definition of leadership that you're kind of holding as the one to work against. I've taught courses on leadership in MBA programs and at undergraduate level, and kind of looked. I'm not a scholar of leadership yet. I have delved into the scholarship on leadership, and in terms of leadership theory, there's a lot of different views. One that is particularly resonant for me is that to be human is to be a leader, because we all have impact on the world. So leadership is about having a more conscious impact. And that's again, not a binary. It's not a black or white, conscious or unconscious. It's about having greater consciousness and greater intention, and perhaps what we might call strategy of how to have what impact on the world with our life, our work, our energy, our affect, our words, our relationships. That's leadership. And every human being does that. To some greater or lesser degree of intentionality, awareness, and effectiveness. So yes, Queer Superpowers for Leaders, I designed in a way to slow the participants down and do this hard work, a little bit of it in bite-sized pieces, let's say over a course of months, in groups, to do that looking. And it's not for any particular rank or level, not necessarily just for managers, not necessarily for individual contributors, not necessarily for executives, but very much could be for executives. The cohort I have at a Fortune 50 company running this program now is kind of the pilot client for it. They are doing a kind of band of managers, from lower managers to like early executive managers, in about, I don't know, 5 different countries in North America and Europe. And we have a cohort of about 30. It's on Zoom, so obviously we come together for a couple hours, and then they have their own small groups where they create even greater community. And I have a sort of structured format for those unfacilitated conversations and workshops that they do without me. They have not yet gotten the book. It's like literally being shipped to them right now, and which I didn't necessarily need or want them to read the book beforehand, but it is called Queer Superpowers for Leaders, and that is one of the sort of basic elements of my book, Queer Flourishing, these 10 patterns and postures that I have seen show up often, not uniformly, in queer lives. So I call these patterns queer superpowers because they are, really are helping somebody do something they couldn't otherwise do and overcome great obstacles, sometimes literally save their lives. For example, an early queer superpower that can develop for some folks is I call the great escape. So of course we know that suicide is the leading cause of death for LGBT youth. Sometimes escaping a family that despises us or that abuses us physically is the only way to survive teen years or preteen years or whatever. This is a superpower. Can you imagine leaving your parents, leaving your home, going off to live in the streets or something? Thank God I did not have to do that, but just, you have kids. We all, it's like we can just open our hearts to recognize the courage, but also the tragedy of this experience. And of course, the great escape can be done in all kinds of other ways. I used to live in Dubai, for example, which I used to call the gayest city in the world, because it was replete with gay men. I don't know the queer women's reality there because it was a very homosocial society. But among gay men, it's like, well, they all left home to come here, and they wanted to, be in the neighborhood. A lot of them are from the Arab world or the Middle East, and go home, and see mom for the holidays, but not live under the sort of surveillance of Arab society in their daily life. So they made a certain kind of escape, a much different one from the one of the street kid, but also takes a lot of gumption to move to another place. So each of these superpowers, and I've just kind of randomly begun thinking of this one to talk about, has powers and pitfalls or limitations. So if, for example, with the Great Escape, if the Great Escape continues to run our life, even after we get out of that immediate danger, and we spend our whole life escaping, well, we never settle, we never really connect, we never trust. We're always trying to move away to the next thing. And I know people like this in my life who are they're always holding off from really becoming themselves. So what helped them tremendously in the past is super limiting their life now. So this is the kind of thing with each of these queer superpowers that we can gain greater awareness of, so that we have greater freedom in how we lead and how we live.
Yeah, I think this is just fantastic. And I remember kind of brainstorming like what the graphic would look like for the inside of the book, and really making sure that it's just a very clear path for people. And I am personally, obviously, I've been working on this with you for a while. I have not read it from cover to cover, but I cannot wait to read it from cover to cover, because I've seen so much of it in different phases of the process that I feel like no matter where you are, there is a place for us to all flourish. And I love that you're using queer superpowers. I remember many moons ago doing a co-presentation with Jennifer Brown and talking about how your queerness is a superpower. Certainly nowhere near to the degree that you're speaking of. Ours was just kind of like, your queer identity is 100% a superpower. You just have to know how to navigate within the systems that are around us. And I love that your book just really makes it so practical and so tangible to be able to show people the power and the pitfall in it. And I love that you're able to kind of pluck out that one example. I think it's fantastic. And again, knowing that you have this leadership development program that people can kind of go to if they want to dive deeper on it. But additionally, you also have another program that you've been running for quite a number of years at this point called the Hero's Journey. And I know that's also talked about in the book too. So can we talk about the Hero's Journey a little bit as well?
Yes. And let me say one thing just to clarify about the Queer Superpowers for Leaders. Like, that is not a sort of open enrollment program that I'm running and people can just sign up. That's for employers. That's for companies or organizations to bring the program in-house. So it could be a cohort of 100 or 150 LGBTQ colleagues in a big company, or it could be LGBTQ colleagues plus allies. And it could be 20 people. I mean, because of, we're doing this primarily on Zoom, it's very scalable in a way without costs changing tremendously. But Hero's Journey is a very different program. That is let's say, open enrollment in the sense that I convene individuals from different sectors, different geographies. I look for as much diversity as possible, except that it is a program for highly accomplished gay, bi, and queer men. So there is a gender exclusive space, and everyone is LGBTQ in one way or another. And then also this kind of, well, it's actually another pattern that some queer people use to kind of handle the shame. That's achievement, overachievement, hyperachievement, trying to earn our way out of our shames through our straight A's or our high paycheck or our prestigious address or whatever. So I find that pattern, again, to be very useful in some ways and to have some limitations. And often somewhere between, often in the 40s, sometimes the 30s, sometimes the 50s, people start asking, like, wait, why am I still chasing what approval through my, like being the best little boy in the world, to name a famous gay memoir that has been very inspiring to me. So, of course, this story is also my story, and that's part of what qualifies me to really do this work of Hero's Journey with other gay, bi, and queer men. It's in a small cohort, usually 5, 6 at a time. And there's a group process that lasts about 4 months with mastermind sessions where the participants take turns supporting each other. One steps forward, brings a challenge or opportunity they're facing. The others ask questions, make observations. It's not advice giving or problem solving, but really trying to see this person and see parts of themselves or their reality that they're not seeing, and help them to try to see more so that they can, grow greater freedom. I also do one-on-one coaching with each member of the Hero's Journey program, and that coaching sometimes is a year or year and a half, or sometimes it's it's just 6 months. There's also a battery of sort of psychometric assessments that give other data to the participants so that they can really define their own personal development plan. So whereas the Queer Superpowers for Leaders program does have set objectives that I define and a curriculum that is standard for everyone, Hero's Journey is totally bespoke. The objectives that are set by each participant, I mean, in conversation with me, of course, to fit their needs and desires. There's no set objectives. There are benefits that I see everyone gaining from it, but I'm currently running my 7th cohort of this program and recruiting the 8th cohort. It has been kind of the flagship of Flourishing Gays. And besides the service I've done to those clients, it's also, of course, been a place where I have learned so much and tested out my ideas about queer development. Much of this book, Queer Flourishing, has really been workshopped in a very live sense through me having the honor to be invited by these men into companionship with them as they try to go a certain leg of their journey that is especially difficult, especially perhaps scary, especially uncertain. And they have, each of them there's, I don't know, some 30, some who've gone through, no, it's probably more than that. Maybe it's approaching 40 now. They've each, well, become themselves more fully in a unique way. And sometimes that's with some friction that happens in these cohorts, and some challenge. Sometimes it's like a big insight. Sometimes it's just slowing down enough to really look and breathe, which is for some very difficult. So yeah, Hero's Journey is one of my favorite things that I do.
Yeah, I can hear your passion in talking about it. And even as you were talking, I was like, oh, you should put this video, just you here on your page about the hero's journey on your website, because you're just really speaking to on such like a deep, passionate level of how you can see transformation, even if that transformation is just taking a couple baby steps. Like, it's still transformative in someone's journey. So I love, I love that that's the work that you're doing. And the last thing that I kind of want to like really kind of go into a little bit more is because your book is called Queer Flourishing. Your website is Flourishing Gaze, but you also do, I love flourishing and nourishing. You do nourishing gaze. And I love that you were able to like, just because I feel like you don't hear the word nourishing often enough. And so I love that you have that. So can we talk about what nourishing gaze is?
Sure. Well, I'll just come out as an eater and a cook. I love food. I am Italian American, and this is part of my unique. It's my special identity. Whatever. One of the things I write about in my book, the coming together of different parts of me. And in my Italian American family, I say, okay, we're Catholic, but our real religion is food. And actually, with my Hong Konger partner, I have learned that in his family culture, likewise, and in Chinese culture more broadly, love is expressed through feeding people. So nourishing gaze is a love fest in a sense, in the that we have a meal that I cook and share and with the group, but ultimately it's a workshop that brings to life the book. Queer Flourishing. It is just in a way, a taster. It's just it's a thing that I've been doing in different cities in the U.S. and in Europe so far, in 4 hours give a community of a newly called into being community of, who knows, could be 10, could be 20 people, hosted in someone's home. So I've hosted a couple of these in my home, but it's been hosted in LA and in London and other former clients' homes who are friends now. And we just begin to look at some of these particularities of queer developmental journeys, how that's shown up for each of us, and to listen to each other's stories so that we can begin to notice the influence of our gender and sexual identities on our maturation, on our growth of our human potential, on our leadership style and our leadership effectiveness. Each person gets a book, but more than that, each person gets a community. One of the things that I have learned really about myself as I have written this book and along this last year or so working with you is that my high dream in writing this book and publishing it is to make personal growth and development a thing in queer culture. That's what I most yearn for. Yeah, I want to have a flourishing enterprise where I have great clients to serve and like I see them growing and changing, and I want to earn my livelihood through doing this work. Absolutely, and the book is meant to help those things. But more than that, I actually want to. This is a little bit ballsy, you might say, or it's truly a high dream. It's like I want to impact queer culture.
Yeah,
I want us to thematize in queer culture personal growth and development. we thematize a lot of things already. Of course, public policy, and saving our rights is one thematic thing that across the LGBTQ community is a thing we talk about. Coming out is a thing already that is thematized. And actually, I see queer people, gay people being so generous with each other as we're coming out. Often an older generation helping a younger in an avuncular or kind of aunt sort of way. It's a place of such beautiful tradition, handing on something from one to the next, handing on wisdom, giving care, giving sometimes parental-like care, one that we didn't get from our actual birth parents. Well, coming out is a touchstone of personal development for LGBTQ people, but it is just the beginning. Being a human being, of course, is much more than this one part of our social identity kind of becoming known to those around us. But we haven't yet, as queer folks, as gay folks, brought all of our resources to bear on this ongoing journey of personal growth and development. And that's the thing that I hope to spark somehow through conversations like this one, through one reader at a time, through Nourishing Gays events, all over the place. Whoever wants to host one, let's have a conversation. Let's bring it to your country. Let's bring it to your city. Let's bring it to your community, to make a space, to create a new practice of opening up, trusting each other, becoming vulnerable, and even creating intimacy, non-sexual intimacy with one another for the sake of our flourishing.
I love that. You have been so consistent and so clear from the start that is one of the big goals for everything that you do. And I love it because just having that level of clarity, I think, is so empowering, because when you are speaking your truth and you are putting what your goal is out there and what this vision is that is well beyond you, it invites people in to have these experiences and to then subsequently flourish. And so I love how everything is so beautifully woven and interconnected.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being a partner in that unfolding, Jen.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you were talking, one of the things you were talking about, kind of like the handing down of history from one generation to another, and how critical that is in queer communities. It's one of the things that I love so much about books, and so much about books like yours, because I just think when I was 19 and coming out and the internet was still not quite a thing, and going into bookstores and just trying to find something that reflected my experience. And we look now and the internet just has experiences in all directions, but to some degree, I feel like there's still something that won't replace a book. And so to think about your book potentially creating these aha moments and light bulb moments for some person to then say to the next generation, I really think you should read this book, to help them get into a place where they can flourish. There's something so beautiful about that physical handoff of a book to another human to be able to have that experience. And I love that so much, specifically in the context of your book and your work.
Yeah. Well, I certainly do see this book as a major feature of my own legacy. Up till now, there's nothing that I have created in my life that I am more proud of, or that is a better expression of all that I have to give, including my intellect and my heart, my spiritual life, and my body. So may I have other such creations. I don't know what they might be. And I do, of course, aspire, like many authors throughout recorded history, for my written words to outlast me at least. And I, of course, do hope that the book provides some kind of succor or assistance to readers down the road. And on the other hand, I hope that some generation in the not too distant future, my book will not be so relevant as it is for people alive today. And that would be because sexual difference and gender difference, I hope, becomes uh, absolutely acceptable part of a variation of being human, like being left-handed, which used to be a problem or in some cultures. And now it's like, oh wow, cool, okay, cool. You know, what do they call it, the southpaw or something? You know, like I don't play basketball, but you know, so I hope and aspire for this book to actually contribute to its own, I don't want to say irrelevance, but obsolescence. It's always going to be some kind of record of what it was like to be queer at a certain moment in history. But I already, of course, see in you know, teenagers today a different experience of even this word queer. But we're not at this point yet. I do think that actually young people have plenty to gain from looking at these patterns and postures that other queer people have adaptively and defensively created to kind of protect themselves and handle crap that the world threw at them. That's still happening. But this is not a perennial book. I hope that these problems, that we kind of solve them. Actually, there's going to be other problems for humanity 300 years down the road, you know, 200 years down the road. But I hope that we're actually, through all of the amazing social progress that has happened in this country and many others in recent years, that we kind of work this out, this whole queer thing or gay thing.
Yeah. As you were talking, I was just thinking, like, what a cool experience to be generations after you and I are no longer here, and someone walks into the used bookstore and just happens to find this and be like, wow, can you imagine a time where this made sense? Like, what a gift to the world that would be. I love that idea. Is there anything I have not asked you that you would like to bring up before we wrap up here?
Well, one question that is beginning to be maybe the most pressing for my own journey is, what is this book teaching me? You know, it's just the beginning. This is the first month that it has been officially, you know, sort of launched out into the world. And I want to share this in part because it's been so beautiful for me to connect with people in new ways. As folks have been reading Queer Flourishing, and of course, many of the very first wave of folks who bought it are friends or former clients or acquaintances or former teachers, former students, and they come to know me. And you have authored your own memoirs, I know, so perhaps you have some of your own experience like this, but they've come to know me at this much deeper level. And then they write me, or they call me, or they say, can we get on Zoom, to tell me more of their story that they're seeing differently, or that they're seeing anew, or that they're appreciating, thanks to having read my story and perhaps having paused a little bit on some of those reflection questions that I intersperse throughout the book. So, and by the way, I also have had a number of people who I did not know from Adam before connect with me on LinkedIn, email me out of the blue, ask if we could have a conversation, and really befriend me through connecting with me through my kind of authorial persona that I've you know, written this book in. And they're like, oh my God, Dominic, you're one of my new favorite people. We have so much in common. And I tell them about my dream of making personal development a thing in queer culture. I'm like, oh my God, I am signed up. How can I help? Let's do this together. I have some ideas. So I knew, okay, I mean, it's literally, you know, called publishing. You're supposed to, like, put it out there, make it public. I knew that there was a whole thing like here of like reaching people, but I didn't really get it until it's begun to happen, where I'm connecting with people far and wide in deeper ways than ever, thanks to this book. And you know, like many writers, I've had my time, you know, kind of in the hermitage with my little, you know, proverbial candle and my quill, like early in the morning, late at night, like revising, you know, different parts for the 14th time. There's a lot of solitude in this project, even though, unlike my dissertation, I was for my PhD, which was a very solitary project, I was like, oh my God, I need this book to be dialogical. I need it to be relational. And so I was giving versions of parts to people from the very beginning and having great conversations, I have to say, along the way. But I did not appreciate just how this book would connect me into deeper relationships. And actually, I think it's beginning to really create a larger community for me in the world, and enlarge the sort of exchanging of love that is possible for me and for others. So that's one thing I did want to share here.
Yeah, I love that. And what's beautiful is that your book's been out for like a month. It is so fresh. It is so new. And you are already having this experience. So imagine, right, like what it's going to look like in 2 months, 3 months, 2 years, 5 years. It's going to be even more powerful. So I cannot wait to see how everything continues to flourish as a result.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jen. And thanks for all your help in making this a reality.
Yeah, you are very welcome. It has been an absolute honor to be part of this journey with you. And so, as I mentioned before, you can go to queerflourishing.com. You can go to flourishinggaze.com. You can go to publisherpurpose.com, all of which have links and ways to purchase the book. If you are going to go to an online retailer to make your purchase, my recommendation is go to bookshop.org, which is a certified B Corp, and they are an independent online bookstore that gives proceeds back to local brick and mortar bookstores. And I love their business model. So if you can divert your funds to them, I think it's fantastic. And obviously go direct to Dominic first and foremost before anything else. And thank you so much, Dominic. I really appreciate this conversation. It's a conversation I feel like I personally needed today. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you, Jen. Really a pleasure.
Yeah. Have a great one. And I'll talk to you.